Hello everybody and welcome to another Unity game development video. In this video I'll be talking about wall jumping, kind of wall detection. This is another one of my Brainine DevLogs. That's the platformer game that I'm working on, and common to a few platformers, I am deciding to implement kind of a wall jump system. And if you want some kind of wall jump system in it, you have to kind of establish a way to detect the vector in which the character will jump. And a good way to do that, I think, is by raycasting. And I can demonstrate right here if I just press play and I zoom in on the player. And let's just lock it in place with Shift F. If I move around, you can see that, well, if you ignore the green raycast on the ground, if you watch my previous video, those are the ground detection rays. Right now we're going to be talking about the ones that show up red around the middle of the sphere. And these ones are for wall detection, and they're set up in a very similar way. I'm going to rotate it so you can see it up against the wall. And what's happening here is when this thing detects a wall, you can see that these will turn green. And when it detects those and turns green, it shoots a separate ray in the opposite direction. And what's happening is it's actually averaging out the negative forward rays that are over here. It's taking their vector directions and it's averaging them out and sending it out the other direction. So what that means really is I could turn it around, and something kind of a more complicated shape like this kind of cylinder object here, it would be very difficult to shoot the ray, detect the hit, get the game object, or check its normals, check the normal angle that it's hitting. So right here we don't actually need any information from the game object. We're just getting those hit points and we're averaging out the vector. So if I take my player and I rotate it and I bring it up to the sphere, I'm actually going to go for the sky view because it'll be easier to understand that way. So that cyan line is actually showing the vector if I were to do a wall jump. And you'll see why this kind of works very well here. If I move over here and I get up to this cylinder, it's still working. Even though it's such a kind of complicated shape, there's definitely a lot more geometry going on than a regular rectangle, but it's actually just getting that opposite vector like that all the way around. And what I'm saying, when it's grabbing the average of those vectors, I can show you in the code exactly what's going on, but as you can see, it's pretty accurate, but it's kind of like jumping a few steps because it's more or less in line with each of these, at least where each of these lines are, or in between by like a vector of a half or so. But we can actually increase the density a lot. We can go into the part where it checks for that, the wall branches, just like how we had the ground check, and we can increase that a lot. So I can increase it to a ridiculous amount, and it will take up a lot of computing power, because it's making a lot of calculations every time it's averaging out all these vectors. But you can bring it to something that high and you'll get a more accurate result. I don't know if it's really something that you would want, but as you can see, it's still detecting it like that. And though it is kind of a wall jumping vector, what I have set up here is if I go down at a different angle, you see that it's going straight out, but I have an up factor here. And as you know, with averaging values, you take the number of the values, you take all the values, add them up together, and you divide them by the number of values. If I have this up factor here, it is taking those values and it's adding vector 3.up, and it's just adding one more value to that which is averaged, and one more value to the total count in which it will be divided at the end. So if I take this up factor and just set it to 1, it should set it to a 45-degree angle. Yep. So that's the vector in which the wall jump will occur. I can adjust that. I can go higher all the way up, and it's kind of like an asymptote. It should never really reach directly up, but it'll get so close to it that doesn't really matter. But if I go lower than 1, it should go down. Yep. It's a little harder to control the values of that. You'll have to create much more precise and smaller floating point values. But it can do it at a lower angle. So if, for some specific reason or for a specific criteria, let's say the character is holding, getting some kind of horizontal input facing the opposite direction of the wall, you can cross-reference those vector values, and if they're moving away from the wall, we can lower that up vector. So what I like to set it to, I just like to set it to 1 or slightly lower than that, so that it's kind of at a 45-degree angle. So now if I jump, once again the wall detection is detecting the ground there, so I'll do it at a different area. Or actually I'll just raise this so that it's not really, the total height of it isn't attainable. If I jump and then jump again, oh well, it's going straight down because the way I was messing with it earlier, I don't have the, what is it called? The multiplier for the jump force at the correct thing. So if I take the multiplier, I'm just going to set it to like 15. It should work now. Yep. Oh wow, and I just happened to make it on this wall here. So I'm just going to say that that was planned, and that was a beautiful demonstration of how it works. And a good demonstration of how the ground detection works too, because I landed straight on it and it's not moving. But I'm just running just a general jumping script that you would if you were to create a character controller in a platformer, but instead of using the up vector that you normally would, just jumping straight up, I'm using the vector that is established by that wall detection. So that cyan line that is right there, that's what's happening. It's taking that vector and jumping me towards that. So if I'm jumping and I press jump midair, it'll launch me. And once again, I landed on the wall. So that works out very nicely. And I could do that on any variation of this wall just because it's detecting it and averaging that vector, and it works really nicely. So if we go into the script and we go to, what is it, wall check, I believe. Yep. So here's the wall check function. It's decently big, but everything inside of it is more or less necessary. So just like the ground detection thing, we are establishing a rotation step, which is the number of branches that are detecting the wall. The 360 degrees divided by that value. We start with a bool, which is set to false. If we go through the entire function and it's not set to true, then it'll just return that value. We have a integer value here called valid hits. And the reason we need that is because there's so many branches going out on the sides of the character that if we just averaged out all the values, even the ones that didn't actually detect the wall, we would either get the incorrect vector, or the vector would be incredibly small and we have to increase the multiplier, because when you average something out, all those values are, I believe, set to 0, not null. And when they're set to 0, we're adding all those 0 values, but we're still going to factor in the amount of inputs at the end, the amount of inputs in that calculation. So if we have 12 branches and only 3 of them are actually detecting the wall, we're taking all those 3 valid hits, but we're still wasting our calculations on those invalid hits. So we're actually going to specifically find which ones are valid and only use those in our calculation. So we are establishing a vector 3, which is called average, and that is the vector movement reference for the wall jump that we're going to establish at the end. And we're also establishing these game objects, the sensor hub and the sensor point. Those work pretty much the exact same way they worked in the ground detection, where we are establishing this sensor hub. It is being positioned directly beneath the player, factor in some kind of offset, or actually not beneath the player because it's not ground detection, it's directly in the center of the character, so it's being placed at the exact position of the character, and then this sensor point is being placed on that position with kind of a local position offset where no matter what the rotation of the sensor hub is, the sensor point is being set to the forward vector multiplied by the spacing. So if we have the hub in the middle, and let's just say it's facing its normal forward vector, if we place the point at that position plus the sensor hub transform.forward times the from center offset. So the from center offset is how far away from the center of the object is that ray going to start. So we take the position of that sensor hub, we add the forward vector times that offset, and we get the position in front of it locally. So even if we go into this section where we are rotating the hub, we're still going to get the forward vector with the offset for that point. So what's happening here is it's taking that rotation step, which is that 360 degrees divided by the amount of branches we have, and we're taking the the iteration of this integer inside the for loop. So if it's 0, the rotation step is times 0, so it rotates it by 0. If it's 1 in the for loop, then we take the rotation step, which, say if there was 6 branches, that would be 60, so 360 divided by 6 is 60. 60 times 1 equals 60, so we rotate it 60 degrees until we finish that entire circle. Then we are taking the sensor point, we're setting that offset from that rotation, and we're placing it in front of it so that we can detect walls with it. And we're just shooting that raycast out. We're returning a hit if the hit does not have the tag of players, so we don't actually end up hitting our own character with those raycasts because they're very close to the center of the character. While is set to true, that's that bool we established at the beginning of the method. We're iterating onto that valid hits by 1, so we know exactly how many, what we should divide by at the end to get the average. The average plus equals the negative transform forward of that sensor. So let's say the sensor is going straight out and it's hitting the wall. We're taking the negative vector of that and we're adding it to the average. So we're basically subtracting it, but I just think it's easier to visualize by doing the plus minus, even though it doesn't technically make sense to do it that way. But that's not the only vector detecting the wall. So if we have 2 other ones on either side of that vector, we're also getting those. And we're going to average out the vectors. In that particular instance, if there was 3 hitting each other, it would kind of just average out to the negative vector of the very center one. But we want this specifically for kind of abstract shapes or going around the edges of objects. So we can still wall jump off of things like that. And we don't have to rely on returning the normal angles of objects. And then we have this kind of debug options. So if it actually detects a wall, the ray is green. If it doesn't, it's red. If the valid hits are equal to 0, well, if they're not equal to 0. But if they are equal to 0, this wall jumping value is set to true. And the only reason I have that set up is so that if I wall jump off of a wall, it won't kind of add the average on every single time. So what I'm saying is that it won't execute the wall function again until I exit the wall and then re-enter another wall detection with a valid point. So if it doesn't have any valid points, the average is set to vector.0, vector 3.0, so no force is going to be applied. Or technically force is being applied. I should really just have it so it doesn't run the wall jump thing, which I don't think it runs either way here, but if it does, then that force multiplier for the jump is being applied to vector 3.0, so really you're multiplying 0 by those numbers, so it still ends up being 0. I guess it's a useless calculation, but it I'm pretty sure it gets ignored anyway. But if the valid hits aren't 0, the average is equal to the average divided by the valid hits. So we're actually getting the real average here. And then what we're doing is we are adding on the transform up times the up factor. And now that I'm seeing this, I remember that we didn't actually factor in the up factor before entering the wall detection and averaging that out. I thought we did, but I remember now that I went back and I changed it, so we're applying the up factor after the fact. We're just adding it on. And the reason for that is that it was actually decreasing the up value quite a bit depending on how many hits were being detected because of the valid hit factor on there. So that's just being added on to the average at the end. So after this kind of logic runs here, we're drawing a ray, that debug ray that is showing off the wall jump vector that we just established from the average. The wall jump vector is being set to the average. Really, this should be set directly after the wall jump vector is established. I'm not sure why it's directly behind it, but it's fine. It's just a debug value. We'll change it later. And then that hub and that point are being destroyed. So the reason those are even established is you don't want to have so many permanent game objects in your scene that are cluttering everything. Why not just establish those game objects at the beginning of a function or method and then destroying them at the end when they've served their purpose? And then we're returning that wall bool values so it's detecting whether there's a wall there or not. And that's really just for kind of an extra layer of purpose for this function, getting that wall value so we don't have an entire other bool up there. But the real meat and use of this function is getting that wall jump vector by averaging the negative vectors of those detection rays. And that's about it. I think it's really cool. And if I go into the game and I grab all these objects and what is up with them? Oh, I bring them back. I have some objects in here. I can play around with them and kind of jump on them and show you exactly what is going on here. So I'm just going to go into this. What is this? Orthographic? I don't remember. But where is this? There we go. That's the view I want. Now, you can't really see the ground in this particular instance, but just pay attention to both views. I'm just going to use this to get around. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to jump. I have to reset those values because they need to be changed because I changed them while I was playing. But I'm going to change that up factor to 1. And I'm going to change that multiplier to 12, see if that works. Nope. Change the up factor to 1.2. And I'm going to change this to 14, see if that works. Almost. Wall multiplier is a little high. I'm actually going to change this back down to 12 and just increase the up factor. I'm going to go 1.5, see if that works. Yeah, that works, and we make it up here. So this ledge is actually so high that by doing a normal jump, you wouldn't be able to get up here without the wall jump. So if I look at the player, and I just focus on them, it'll be interesting, maybe rewind and look at it. I might do it a few times, but I'm going to jump between those two objects over there just to kind of show you what it looks like. Wow, my jump value is set really low right now, so it's kind of hard to make these jumps. I might have to go in and change that, actually. Yeah, I'm going to have to go in and change that. Let's just change the jump value so I don't have to end up going down there. Vertical movement. Where is it? Jump multiplier. Let's set that to 26. Can I just jump straight up here? Yep. So I can just jump up here, do this. And it works. And I can just jump between these. And it is detecting. I can't jump midair. Obviously, you don't want that to happen in something unless you have a double jump set up in the game. But I'm just, I can wall jump all the way up to my destination. And you could see there with the cyan debug, that's actually the vector that it's taking for the wall jump. And I think it's very interesting, and I think that this is probably one of my most satisfying code things that I figured out in a game. I didn't look up anything for this. I just kind of logically worked it out in my head. I think it works really well, and I like it a lot. And hopefully you like it too. I might post the code at some point. Check the description. If it's not there, I might post it again in a few days. Feel free to message me if I don't. but I think is a really clever solution, and just wanted to share it with you guys. So I hope you liked the video. I'm going to be posting a lot more like this in the near future. And subscribe, like the video, and favorite or whatever YouTube does nowadays. Thanks for watching. Bye.